So we need to make some eye controllers here. And the eye controllers are very simple to make. They're going to be the same thing as locators for each eye. So one locator for each eye, and also a NURBS circle. So to begin creation, we're taking off of the point where we left from creating the eye joints, and they're working pretty well. If you end up trying the test of getting this eye to follow the joint when it's rotating, you're going to have to come in here because I found a duplicate eye, and this is only if you're using this character. There's a duplicate eye in there that you have to delete, and once it's deleted it will look as though the eye is working correctly, because otherwise the eye is not going to work in the manner that we would like it to. It looks like the eye snaps back just because the other one stays in place, and when this one turns or rotates, it looks as though the eye is locked or stuck. So that's just the second piece of geometry in there, or the second eye in the same spot. So to create this, we're just going to come up here to create, and we can start with either locators or the NURBS circle. And I'm going to start with the NURBS circle because it's based off the notes here. When I create the NURBS circle, it's going to go to the bottom again, right? I'm going to use the arrows to pull this up and to the side. I'm also going to be popping into the side view so that you can see how to get this to work a little better. And this part isn't too difficult to work with. I am just going to basically align this, and I'm going off of my arrows here. There's a bunch of different methods you could use, but I'm going to align this as best as I can to the eye joint. And it's not totally necessary, because what we're going to do is we're going to be using constraints and such, which are going to allow us to basically take our information of this joint and the placement and have it work from wherever it is and control the two other locators that are going to be controlling each eye. So we have a lot of versatility when it comes to constraining something in a particular area or spot. I'm going to rotate this thing up, and I know it's the x-axis, so I'm going to come to rotate the x-axis 90 degrees. And I'm going to snap it to the grid, but I also am going to drag it by this handle, or one of the handles. Hold down X first, and you're going to see the X is snapped to grid up here. Drag it, and I don't need it too far away from the eyes, so I'm thinking that something like this would be pretty beneficial for our animations, and that's really what you want to base this off of, the movements for the animations. I shall pop out of there and pop into the perspective view, and I'm going to rename this. So this should be called Eye Look At, based off the notes. If you guys want to label it something else, that's fine, because this part is not very detrimental when it comes to naming, not like the joints and such. I'm going to scale these down. I'm going to kind of get this to look a little bit like Bender's goggles from Futurama. So I can take these, and I'm just scaling the CVs, so just basic modeling, right? I'll make this a little bit larger, and I could always change this up a little bit after I create the locators. The whole point of this is to have it so they're going to be able to house the locators, and you can take this and drag it around by transforming it and having the locators follow. So I'm going to call that good for now, and I'm going to go up to create, and I'm going to create my locators. So if I create one locator, it's going to snap down here to the origin of our scene. I'll hit W to evoke my move tool. I'm going to hide the geometry for 1 second, and I'm going to snap the locator to the left eye node or joint. So I'm going to hold down V. I'm already in my move tool, so I hold down V, which is snap to point. Come up here to my joint, hold down my middle mouse button, just move my mouse around, and it should snap. Again, if you have having issues with Maya snapping this, then what you want to do is just move your camera angle because sometimes it's just having a hard time figuring out where you're trying to snap this. So I'm going to change the name of this right away to left eye look at. I'm going to duplicate that. So I'll do Control D this time to duplicate it instead of Edit Duplicate. But if you ever forget, go ahead and use Edit Duplicate. I'm going to hold down V and I'll click and drag this onto the right eye joint. And I do need to change the label of that right away. So I'm going to call it right eye look at. Once those two are created, you can select them both. I just drag a marquee around them. I'm going to pop it out of the perspective view, pop into the side view. And since I snapped this previous NURBS circle right here to the grid, then I can do the same thing with these by dragging this handle, but first holding down X. So I'm going to hold down X, click and drag this handle, and you're going to see that it's only going to snap it to the vertical lines of the grid, and we won't have to worry about it snapping to these parts right here, which are going to be the intersections of the grid, and offsetting our eyes. Because remember, we're going to have this look or control the look of the eyes, and if we have it up or down, then we're going to have to compensate by trying to adjust it so that the character doesn't look as it's looking to the ground or to the right or cross-eyed or something like that to begin with. Now, with these created, I can select all of them just by dragging a marquee around them. I do want to go to Modify and freeze the transformations. So always freeze your transformations before adding anything like constraints and stuff on there. Also, delete the history, edit, delete by type, history, and that usually allows for us to get rid of any nodes and stuff in there that are possibly linked to this for whatever reason. Now, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and take my left eye locator, and I'm going to shift select the left eye joint, because remember, when we're using the constraint, we want to select the parent, which is going to drive the child. So think of it that way. Select the parent first, shift select the child, and then you want to use a constraint. If you want to think of it another way, you could select whatever's going to drive another object first. So this is going to drive the joint. So I select this first, and then I shift select the joint. So I'm going to go to Constrain, down to Aim, Option Box. And I'm just making sure that Maintain Offset is on. Again, I like to tell you guys to go to Edit down to Reset Settings when you're working on the school computers, because they will basically be set to whatever was used last. So if somebody before you was using this and they were using a different vector or something like that, then whatever you set up, it might not work the way that you expect it to, and then you have to go clean that up. So I'm just going to click Add, and I'm going to do the same thing to the right eye, but for the right eye, I could just select the locator, shift select the joint, and since this is kind of like a command, the Constrain Aim, I could either come up here and click on Aim, and it'll go off of my previous settings, or I can come down here and click G. The G key is a hotkey to evoke a command that was last done, and in that case it was the aim constraint. Now, I can take these two locators, so I'll shift select the locators first, click on one locator and then shift select the other. That way we're not having a joint in our mix because this joint was selected. When you click on one thing without holding shift, it's going to deselect that other joint. You can see the link here because there's a color change in the joints indicating that they are linked to something, and that could be a constraint or a parenting of some sort, and so on and so forth. So if I select these two, I'm going to use the parenting under Edit up here, Edit Parent, okay, or the P key, and I need to select the children first. So I want these two objects to follow this. So I select those two as children to follow the parent, and that's the way that Edit Parent works. So don't forget that. It gets kind of tricky when you're trying to work fast. But with that selection, I'm just going to hit the P key. It's the same thing as going up to Edit down to Parent. and I could select the eye look at and move it around, and they follow. Okay? Now, to test this, I'm going to bring the geometry back, and I'm not sure, I should have looked at the last tutorial again because this one is a redo based off of the other one not having sound. But basically, what you can do is you can take the left eye and have it follow the joint. Okay, so what you can do is you could either later on when we get to skinning, you can do a rigid bind. But right now, just since the eye's going to follow this, I can do a simple parent. So I can select the eye, shift select the joint, and hit P on my keyboard. Okay. Now mine is already done, so I can test it, and it's going to follow that joint. Okay. I'll select the other one to make sure that that one's parented. The geometry is parented to the joint. Okay. And they are, so they're going to follow. And now I could test my locators. The first thing that I do is I select the eye look at, which is the main one, and I'll just move this. This one's based off translations, and that's working pretty good, which indicates that if I select one of these, that should be linked correctly. If I select the other, it should be linked correctly as well. So now we can have dynamic eye movements with this character just by setting keys on this eye look at and also the right or left eye locators.